They say that day when Sayyid al-Shuhada decided to leave Medina, you know what he did? The first thing he did was he went to the grave of his grandfather. On the way there, Salama was there. Who is Salama? His grandmother. Salama raised Imam Hussein after Zahra. What does Salama say? She says, son, where are you going? He replies, he says, grandmother, I'm going to my judge's grave. He says, why are you going there, my son? He says, because I want to complain to him. His ummah's not letting me stay in Medina anymore. He says, Hussein, where are you going? He says, I'm going to Karbala. I'm going to Iraq. He says, your grandfather said to me, Ahl Iraq will kill you. Imam Hussein goes. As he walks towards the grave of Rasulullah, he walks like a man would walk. Waqar is there, walks there next to the grave. He says that when he puts his head on the grave, he remembers something. He remembers as a child when Rasulullah would grab him, put him next to his chest tightly. He remembers all of that. He closes his eyes wishing Rasulullah would come again. You know what he sees? In a dream he sees Rasulullah stands up from his grave, comes to Sayyid al-Shuhada, hugs him and he says, Hussein, Allah has decreed that you are killed in Karbala. Mashiach of Allah such. So you know what Imam Hussein says? The first thing he says is this. He says, grandfather, I don't care about myself. Just tell me one thing. What's going to happen to Zainab? Says, Allah has decreed that she's imprisoned. They say Imam Hussein gets up. Tears are in his eyes. As he walks out of the rows of the Prophet, a man comes to him and says, Hussein, why is there tears in your eyes? He says, my grandfather has told me I'm going to be killed in Karbala. He says, but Hussein, shahadat is for you. He says, that's not why I'm crying. He says, why? He says, my Zainab is going to be imprisoned. That's why I'm crying. Ali's Ghaira is going to be imprisoned. My father couldn't hear my sister crying. He would say to the people of Kufa, go from here because Zainab is crying. You know the biggest sign that the women of the Ahlul Bayt were oppressed is a 3-year-old girl. Why? Because that 3-year-old girl's ears were still bleeding when Imam Zain al-Abidin was burying her. Look, I wish I could say more. Imam Hussein then goes quickly towards the grave of his brother. He goes there, he gives final farewells. Hadith says though, when he goes to the third and last grave, who does he go to? His mother's grave. He runs like a child runs. He jumps onto the grave, tries to hug the grave. He says, mother, take me into the grave. Nighttime falls, Imam Hussein goes back to his home. When he goes back to his home, Sayyidah Zainab calls him. Goes to Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab says, brother, all night my heart's been breaking. He says, why? He says, every time I go into my house, when I go into my room to lie down, I can hear a voice coming from outside. It seems like that there's a broken-hearted woman saying, Wa Husayna. Sayyid al-Shuhada looks up, says, Zainab, recognize that voice. That's our mother Zahra. Next day comes. Next day, Marwan gives the hukum. Yazid's given a letter, I want bay'ah from Hussein. Gives the hukum. Zainab comes to know. Says, brother, where are you going by yourself? Says, I'm going to the court of Marwan. Zainab begins to panic. She runs to Abbas. She says, Abbas, Hussein is going by himself. Abbas, go and protect him. Abbas gets up, takes his sword out, goes running towards Sayyid al-Shuhada. But Zainab doesn't stop here. She goes towards Akbar, says, Ali Akbar, no, son of Zahra is going alone to the court of... Ali Akbar takes his sword out, goes running, but she doesn't stop there. She says, Qasim, your uncle alone is going. Qasim gets up, says, Onan Muhammad, your uncle is going alone. They say 18 youth of Banu Hashim with their swords come to Imam Hussein. Says to Sayyidi, you're going alone while we're alive? Imam Hussein goes with 18 youth. As he gets to the court of Marwan, he just says to Abbas one thing. Says, Abbas, if my voice is raised, you know what to do. Abbas is outside. Imam Hussein goes inside. The door is locked. Marwan says, Hussein, give your allegiance. Give your bay'ah to Yazid. At that moment, he says, you want me to give bay'ah to Yazid? Somebody like me gives somebody like him. As his voice begins to raise, Marwan says, go kill Hussein. Tradition says one man goes forward towards Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein's voice is raised. Abul Fadl al-Abbas takes out his sword, grabs the door is locked, takes his shoulder, hits the door falls. Abbas comes in, says, Mawla, which one shall I kill first? Imam Hussein looks up. He says, Abbas, this is the city of my grandfather. I don't want any bloodshed in the city. You know what he says at that moment? He says, Abbas, now get ready. It's time for us to move from Medina. A Rawi by the name of Abdullah says, he says, I saw Hussein the day he left Medina, and then I saw Hussein on the day of Ashura. He says, what did you see? Rawi writes, he says, I saw Hussein sitting there. On his right was Abul Fadl Abbas. On his left was Ali Akbar. He says, Hussein gave a letter for all of those people who were going to Karbala. One man stood there and he recited. He called all of the women out one by one to come out to go on the camel. The first thing he says is this. He says, Layla, come out. Ali Akbar, go, take your mother, put her on the camel. One camel would come, young son would go, grab his mother, put her on the camel. Next woman would come, next one would go, grab their mother, put them on the camel. Eventually a time came when Fidda came out and said, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Kulthum is coming. Abbas stands up, goes forward and says, I'm going to make sure that my sister goes on top of the camel. When all of the women were on the camel, then Fidda with tears in her eyes comes out, says the daughter of Zahra, Zainab is coming. Abdullah says, I saw Hussein stand up himself, and he gets up and he goes to his sister. At that moment, his sister with tears in his eyes says, brother, please today, you're not going to put me on the camel. So at that moment, Imam Hussein says, Ali Akbar, you go. Zainab says, Ali Akbar, not you today. Onan Muhammad, you go. Says, Onan Muhammad, not you today. Imam Hussein says, Zainab, who would you like, Abbas? She says, no. I want that person who on the day of Ashura, the day after Ashura, will put me on that camel. Sayyid al-Shuhada puts his head down. Sajjad, you come forward.